아래 당신 당은 상계 먹고 덤블이야 준제 상계 취송 얘네 아니 제가 심지어 바도메 반 달바다 탐지기 먹고 홀로 고요라디 고요레스 이나다 아주 안디가서 상계 공무수 제제 상계 기산이 최용수 수준이면 제제는 야안 제가 달바다 탐지기 먹고 말아와레스 지사 상계기 되니게 고브라이어 말레스 어두스네 라디오스 이 가르쳐서네 저기 녀모배 샤워 소제 한 디긴게 아주 고 맞죠래지 근데 자다 더누인데 저기 디바 고슴기 디바 자와 제바이나 안디니 마소나 계지디네 근데는 나 고브라에 공부시부리에서지 온도스네 제가 디네 자다당 저기 지게 대ring 아주 상이 점을 패와다 상이기 취송바 디네자다 저게 다왕하다 조주산 류제 상보 토바데라 고갑위에 되버텔이야 아주 책임야매하고 제고래서 배주지 책임야매 제고래서 그게 당아서 더더로 신디고 지시로 하다.
Good evening. So last week we looked at a number of verses. And in the conclusion, the point was made that many Buddhas have appeared in our world. They've taught, guided beings directly, leading beings to the cultivation of the paths of the Theravada and Mahayana and the attainment of liberation and enlightenment. However, we have not achieved such an opportunity, and therefore, not having been guided directly by the Buddhas, we find ourselves with an immense accumulation of non-virtue on our continuum, non-virtue that can potentially lead us to fall into the lower realms. So recognizing that whilst this is our current predicament, we have somehow attained a precious human rebirth, and thereby, on the basis of this rebirth, we can purify the past negativity and strive to accumulate extensive new virtue.
아니네 자다 언제 기신 가르치고랬으니 제가 나한테 된주의 밀류를 뭐지 토바 된대려야 하는 냠내 하고치 마두바이나 마오바나 아니 된되게 된토야 될 깔라가고 그래서지 아니 마세다데 아주 된대려야 전주심 잠니지 kom 전주심 배주가 바로 침발을 라브는 냠내 제가 그거 여바디 대지 마두바나 마오바나 공부 차기를 했으면 밀류토야 밀류토바 신도 건보래 디나네게 된주의 밀류를 뭐지 토바도 건보래스 자신이 된주 밀리를 토바니나 안 된del이야 잠니제자 자주sem기 냠는지에 고급라야도 공부를 해서다 이런 거가 요바들 도시는 전주 제시 배전지 아주 냠는지 오래 해서 그게 되는 쉬루하다.
Further, the points that were coming from the reflection from last week is that this opportunity that we have achieved, we must not take it for granted. We must not be overly confident that such an opportunity will be attained again. To achieve a similar excellent rebirth comes about independence on the causes we cultivate. So therefore we should focus on, now having met the Mahayana, to striving in cultivating all the causes of the Mahayana, so we can generate minds such as great love and great compassion within. This is how we should use what remains of this life.
나 디네는 뭐 저기다 제가 디네게 된주 밀류를 뭐지 톱고 여바래 이나 제 아주 gelege 전에 되냐면 진지가 다든 제가 말아와서 배 삼로 연구배나 나디 디디고 말해서 나도 신 순간 되는 맛이야 돼. 내매 니마 디다고 세제 세와 매장이 천에 끼지 루아데 류니 탕지
recognizing that we have this precious human rebirth, but not yet making full use of it, is quite easily likely to not valuing it, not seeing it as something that is finite and may well not be attained again. This then brings us to the next verse, the 16th verse. Today I may be without illness, have sufficient to eat and not in danger. but this life is deceptively fleeting. This body is but briefly borrowed.
Ngotesen didire digo mardas. Ngotre nango mas. Ngotre nangu ores. Jesangajuge manazule dati devodu ngada ning lega dijo nyelanga chamjang ro jina chyenyamnen gidije mongbane jigin lo jama jigin samdangadi notre digo marsen ma ngotre jigo le jela. Rache jigo le.
What's expressed here at the start of the verse is something that does deceive us so, in that our health is perhaps excellent, otherwise pretty good, and our circumstances, our material circumstances are also fairly remarkable. And yet we take this for granted. We see this as ordinary, and we spend our time and energy in accumulating further worldly pleasures and enjoying them, having relaxing time with our friends and so forth. And in this way, we procrastinate. Our life, our opportunity is consumed. So we've come to recognize this precious human rebirth, see its value, or have at least an understanding of its value. But yet, we are deceived by the laziness of procrastination, thinking, tomorrow, next year, I will start.
Je lule na zemeba ane lu debu tangda yoba. Ane seche sido nga zuyu tsuyu yuji tunyen chasang kanga meba, tunyen chasang zom deba. Ane ya cewa meba sido shenyi sosolya nyoba chibu bashi chigan cewa chigini me deba ina, me deba dida nga zuyu da misi digi nga zuyu duenda denba si misi digi da dirwa da nga zuyu lu debu yoba chi soso tunyen chasang sang deba shenyi sosolya kanga chigan nyoba chigan me deba chi nada nga zuyu ya jibbe da nga ji wuyi nga de wuyi sebe da nga zuyu dukshin ji yoba ne da nga zuyu misi deli ya citi zami samda na nga di nga jige digi punsum soba saya chego ruwa da nga digi punsum soba si ruwa.
Looking then at these first two lines in the 16th verse, today I may be without illness, have sufficient to eat and not in danger. That this is our actual situation. This is in accordance with our lived experience. Our health is okay. We have an abundance of resources. So sufficient to eat. So in ancient times, that would be considered a great wealth. But we have sufficient to eat and really comfortable resources around us. Everything that we require, we have. And we are not in danger. Our life is not easily threatened. We have the protection of law and so forth. And being in such a very comfortable situation, we can very easily deceive ourselves and fall into comfort and enjoyment. And in this way, enjoying the pleasures of life, our time is quickly spent.
Jisa denigi samdang jisa luli na zemeba lu debu che tungen chasang cawa yoba che an cewa shengi nyoba chiga meba yoydu kabla nga zuge samlo nala ya ngidi li orsine ngidi na denishi yungriye sembeda denigi teburi nga zyo maung bana gili jina nyamden chebe chwe chebe na de kasheni chwe chege samlo koron kogo marwa denigi yoydu kabla chwe chege samlo kogo marwa jisanda sosugi ji 년이도 교야 소속이다 대가 제하다 소속 캠캠도야다 두신의 삼고는 마도 최지에게 삼고는 고고 말와 가지야는 최지에게 되바 되냐기 여바이네 오다딩아디 데스도 두신의 마오바나 길길이 제와선 배 삼로로 주두신의 제리고로 제사디나 먼저 지고 말해 제래다 제사디네자 같이 오래서는 아니 리링아 저기 수부 대부여봐 아니 지금 튕긴 차상 상대여봐 아니 지생기 최제발라 바시 채와지게 뇌버지게 바시 매디비 튕견쳐서 좀베게 님어 될려야 님어 될려야 뒤수될 님어세도 뒤수세고 그거다 그래서 되네게 뒤수될려야 아주 배주 제제 아니 디본 계급된 냠는 제야디 예치모 슈레 해서 지송거를 제고를 해서 그러다
Whilst what we've achieved is something that beings aspire for, desire for, strive for, to be in relative good health, to have an abundance of comforts around us, and to be safe. But having attained that with relative ease in this life, our mind desiring the Dharma, yearning for the Dharma, this is not very strong. Rather, our excitement, our focus, our energy goes into accumulating and enjoying various pleasures. And whilst we do value the Dharma, we very easily procrastinate. Tomorrow I will engage. Next year, next month. As soon as these tasks go off, enjoyed this experience, then I will. Our priorities are greatly skewed because of these incredible comforts and the ease with which we have things in our life. So here we are being encouraged to look at our situation in a different way, to recognize what we've achieved, what we've obtained, and see it actually as being a very rare situation, and how greatly fortunate we are, and therefore to make use of these comforts, make use of this excellent situation where we are in relative good health, we do have sufficient to eat, and we are not in danger. Not let the situation go to waste, but rather use it to apply ourselves in our Dharma studies and meditations.
예상한적이 디니게 강아균에 삼마다베네 디니게 유디급을 취마지바 삼마다 냠네 마제바이나 지산 삼 코라이디 되스 만줄이야 만줄리에 담보줄이야 직디니게 소소 디보여 받아 튕겨 세상 상대바 안지 생기 뇌체가에 메디갑라 소소베 김나샤데 디기 기디나 되는 중요하게 레선비게 삼만이야 디 교육이네 드라메디겐 템부 슈진바레 선비게 삼만이야 되네게 지게 딱바진체 딱바삼 딱바진 되네게 진되네 삼다지는 가지고 최체 고급지 냠는 제 최체되게 되는 dum바디 리고 말에 제사디 최 냠는 제세도 강아지레 세제 동안에 타야다 딜레 타야게 삼다 타고 동안 삼다죠 강아지 초삼면도 강아지라 타야기 타고도 제산 강아지 타봐라 탑람 냠는 디제고 삼비게 제산 강아지 타르되게 삼바지 끼어도 최제에게 고급 냠는 지리고래 삼리고래 봐 제산 데네기다 강하게 삼기는 마다면은 데네기 기부디다 소소나 기디나 데네 용 교화기네면 딱바 템포 휴지래서 기디나지 데네 중그래서 병아서 로려 데네 차리고 봐 제산 산이 시기마나 로제마 시기마라 삼는 나는 디여르다 이내 제산 디 신장아서 로제마 차상에 체지된 거랑 디지게서 제산 데네 삼아서 딱바 짐바서 딱선 시글리고 제산 데네게 삼단데 딱선이 왕의 삼다지도 아주야 최제에게 삼로이디 고고 말해서 이렇게 바시로 뒤차고 해서
The primary obstacle for beginners to be able to actually enter into the Dharma, have their mind arise with the Dharma, the primary obstacle is not thinking about the sufferings of samsara. And for ourselves, with our abundance, it's very easy to sit here in comfort, enjoying what we have, because this has led to us being obscured about the reality of our situation. Our pleasures, our lack of coarse suffering, has led us to be obscured about the actual situation we find ourselves in. And also, as still very ordinary, low-level practitioners, a consciousness which grasps at permanence, at things as our situation being unchanging, this consciousness is what is so greatly deceiving us. So we need to recognize the truth of what's being said and reflect on it continuously to shake up this delusion of believing that our situation will last. And looking at our situation in a very broad way, the life we have, the opportunity we have with the Dharma, and breaking this down into short time segments, as well as the various comforts and pleasures that we have. Our situation is not fixed, but is changing momentarily. But because of our grasping at our situation being permanent or unchanging, we are deceived. We need to shake ourselves free from this delusion, which is not realistic, not in accordance with reality, and recognize the impermanence of our situation. Again, our life, our resources, our comforts, and in particular, this opportunity, this finite opportunity. Because it's this grasping at permanence, this delusion, that is the primary obstacle for us to engage in the Dharma. Therefore, this is what we need to focus our attention on.
직당 본이 되게랑 저게 류디고 있네 류를 나서면봐 되고여봐도 튕겨 차상 상화 아니 죄를 봐 채워 신기 채워면봐 안직 튕겨 차상 상회 되라 아니 배수의 냠는지데 아니 냠는 제거를 디봉 그룹이 아부제거래서 디봉하다 개와 주비하게 냠내 아부시거래 시신 아니 니베들의 세네 계지 계지 루아데 류니 탕직 연보신스도 다 가서 그러는데 제가 채세디 끼지끼지 지루고래 지래 제가 당하는 데지가 삼가다 가는 삼 가로서는 데니기 통보 디고에도 게디나 다라니 되게 삼로들 삼나나 지래 두시 샤르디고 와신 데니 있는 거라 소리야 데니 나는 가서 데니게 삼고래 삼도디 딱 받침바 다선 차고래 제가 채세디 그냥도 삼로 나와 나지가 삼로 나지 말다 채세디 끼지끼지 지루고래서 지루고래 제가 데니기 류세디야 탕지 유점 뜻뜻마도 갱갱한지 채버지 류다 셈니가 끼지끼지 유어 지루 거라서 안데는 맞아 류셔야 되라 가지고 지게 소년 나신 지게 가서래 갱지 채버나 람사 내가 기초제 루고 수고메데와 차주 내 나초죠 시초죠로도 차용 거래서 제가 디네사 체계지게 지바다 류끼지게 그지 지바 뒤지 통담지를 미네바지 소년 나지레스 제자다 되니기 임바지래 가는 저기 어다지 딱바 템포 그디나 지게 디나신 요래 선배 삼다디 노트 루아레스 되니 삼다디 루아레스 되니 능고데 나와 나신 딱바 템포디 요마레스 루아세데 나와 나 가서 삼로나 샤와 나신 아니 저기 세다 류다 딱바 템포 메바 낭드 맞다 딱바 템포 그디나 디나시 요래스 바 낭드 요때 나와 나신 딱바 템포 요마 기지기지 유어 두고레스 제자 되니에서 두스는 삼당고래 되네 삼당에도 나에도 오다 다 아니 나 탕고다 디디 수부디고요 바 탕고요 고고요데 맞아봐나 아니 기지기지 교어도 제일야 아니 가서 나셀이야 레시그레 아니 직신의 시시그레 마시바네 되네 룰레 나사이레네 디긴기 고 체체야 고프라그마 라사마레 야나 아니 직경엔 바시레 생기 녀바다 채와로서 발레지네 아니 룰리야 채와제 되네 강아 체체 되네게 아주지야 고보라고 말해 되네 아니 야 튕긴디게 마다 튕기 강아 체제 아니 다들 튕기 여바 있네 가브리에 안에 구마쇼하다 메치발라서 바다 되네게 메바 차서 반데 된 튕기 강아 체 되네게 주지야 고보라서 오 되네다 냥 직다데 주지야 고유디 가브 도체오레 셈페티는 준리chen 제오레세 제사다 되네게 아주 추스 제기 냠랭게 삼로 코리아리아 둠바키알이야 삼바티 당고레서 체티세디 기지기지 집어 루이스데 기지기지바 타주 유점 마도 따바팀부 미네바 안두싱한도 따바팀부 삼바 나신나지 요마레스디 루아레사지 온두신 삼당고레스 그 삼당바이네 아니 다데 고비여바텔 최진 되니 둠바키게 안 두신 냠나 제고레스 거라
Once we have achieved this excellent circumstance that we have now, we need to shake ourselves up, recognizing what we've achieved and that this is a fantastic basis to engage in the Dharma. If we didn't have this basis such as this, we may well long for it so that we can practice the Dharma. But now that we do, all these coarse obstacles don't occur, such as poor health, impoverishment, and so forth. Therefore, what we have achieved in this life, we should use as a basis for striving in the Dharma. Then Shantideva continues in the third and fourth line. But this life is deceptively fleeting. This body is but briefly borrowed. So here too, Shantideva is getting us to recognize how we grasp a permanence, that we see our life as being extensive. Throughout the entirety of this life, up to this present moment, we've believed that there is an expanse of time ahead of us, and we've lived under this illusion. So here too, we need to challenge our grasping at permanence, to recognize how very fragile our situation is. We see it as stable, as lasting, as something quite solid. But this is the illusion of believing that things exist in the way they appear to our mind. With reasoning, we can recognize that severe illness can come from something very minor. Just a slight change in the cells of our body can lead to severe illness suddenly befalling us. Likewise, change in our material situation, our financial situation, this too can come about quickly, easily. And in particular, in terms of our mental situation, we know from a small cause, just a mere hearing of sound and imputing meaning to it, disliking that speech, anger can arise, or seeing something, desire arising. And in this way, our mind is overwhelmed by very minor causes. So our body and our mind, our material conditions, all can change so easily. So this we need to recognize repeatedly so as to shake up this deeply ingrained grasping at permanence. Coming to recognize that everything we think about, every object of thought, we grasp at it as being lasting, when this is not how it exists. Nothing exists in the way that it appears. But this wrong consciousness, this grasping at permanence, this is deceiving us. Due to that, our opportunity is wasting away. We need to recognize that the time will come when our health becomes poor. Then we'll yearn for what we have now. Our material situation may radically change, and we'll then yearn for what we had now, thinking, if only then I'd used my opportunity to change my mind better. Or for those we have responsibility for, their health, their material situation may radically change. And that too will impact our opportunity to cultivate the Dharma. To recognize just how easy we have things right now, and utilize this to strive in the Dharma, to engage in the Dharma. And with this recognition, or to bring about this recognition rather, we need to see that our grasping at permanence, this is what's deceptive and deceiving us, stealing our opportunity away, leading us to waste. We need to recognize that every object of thought, everything we think about, does not exist in the way that it appears. Recognizing that basis of reasoning will give us a strength of mind to strive to engage in the Dharma.
subo thangbo debu yudu kabli nyamle macheba inda an jidron mangobane che de kala khabore sten zada jeza manjuge cheda luise de sungyen nashin sungyen se da manju ben sungyen 다외기 sungyen ma chunar bhasha de ban sungyen men da wa ngone ra yobaro 통고 할때 ina da wa ngone 처리해요 봐봐 jeza de mini be 추당모 지나로 다외 sungyen 야고 샤도 sungyen de 샤도 거 할때 ina ngone nashin 직 be 지우 유니부 되게 삼코데 여 말에는 timbal에는 님에게 제 다와 timbal에 제 다와의 값선은 미니 주나는 수년에 매와 자르고 봐. 야디 취디파 라바 숙치무게 파 취디에서는 다연의 수년에 돌아 매와 자르고 봐. and Dawakhroma Joy did me match. Sunyan, I double Timo Jinji, Chitena, Jin Chimbaji, Davig, Dawakapshana, and then David Sunyan Meva Chadugre, Jin Lung Chimbujle, certain Chudelia, Partusovana, and then Sunyan Meva Chadugre, just a Jin donate Sunyan Nashi could do that same like usually double Timbo Yomare, such, or Dushina Samta, and it is a dinashida. They see Nima said that Nima Nashi, or that Nima Bella Chavene, Nima Nashi, or. The Nima Nashi has a Nima de Shore, Marsha, Page, Sebo Shuji, Yakushuji, they are the Kiji, Kamachi, Kuyukorama, Dugo, President Dugo Mara, Penny Dugo Mara, Lamsa, Chikugo, Paduman Pa, the Kiji, Kuni, Chigmani, Bacha, Lamsa, and Dugo, since John Gonzalez on time of Charugorba. On Dinashi, Kongazu, Miseta, Lucia, and the best. Chiktak but tempo shoe, Nangor, some gore, the Yamarki, Jinanzuki, Dushin, Jidong as a Hagu, but do Jidu or Jidu wars, Dushin sometimes, and then some old didn't me that the Negi go up to Yabu Yedi of the Majim and Pesasari, some jet, that the Negi sometimes, and want to do some Kiji Chipa, Midemba, Sunyan Najeri, Nima Najeda, Pa Jingshanima, Jiki, Miduba, George, Gondale Nupje, time of a Chaduba Najin Chile, Sebi, Dushin sometimes, and Jazan that the Yahuyoba Teleco telling that Tibongi Yakuchin, Sebi that Dushin Mach, Sunju Somje, and the same Bamegi want to Mata Yomo, want to Matawache, then a Bayu Tenje, and a Sunju, and a Givenium Legiata, and Tibongi of Jea. And Jamni Jocomia, changes some comia la sobada, dus Yamlechi or Eseta, Dondala, in Buddhism.
As these two lines make very clear, this life we have is deceptively fleeting. It's changing momentarily. This body too, this too, is changing. Recognize that all that we have is perishing moment by moment. Its end is drawing ever nearer. It is changing. And the time will come when our situation is not as remarkable as it is now. Then we are in danger of looking back with regret. I didn't recognize just what I had achieved. I didn't recognize just how easy things were compared to now. This time will come. One can use in these meditations analogies, one of which to deepen our understanding. One is the analogy of a reflection, that a reflection appears as the real object. So the reflection appears as being true or being real, but it is only a reflection. And this is how we relate to things. Whatever appears to our mind, we see it as real. Now, reflections, we have come to learn what they are. So in dependence on causes, we've come to see that a reflection is deceptive. But in terms of what appears to our mind, we've yet to come to learn that whatever appears is deceptive. It's as unreal as a reflection. Secondly, with a reflection, it may look very stable, but due to a minor cause, it's gone. So for example, if we take the classic illustration of the reflection of the moon in a still lake. So the water is perfectly still. The moon too seems still. But just a slight breeze, and there's ripples on the water, and that no longer looks like a moon. The reflection is lost. Likewise, our own situation, whether our good health, our material situation, our opportunity to practice the Dharma, and the quality of our mind, the state of our mind, just like a reflection, in dependence on a minor cause, the situation changes. A slight change within our body, or a meeting, an unwanted situation, and our situation changes radically, just in dependence on a slight cause. This is the precariousness of our situation, not at all stable. In another analogy, so that was a reflection relating to the moon. Another analogy would be relating to the sun, or thinking about the sun. The sun, in a sense, we see it as something as as lasting. But the truth is, it's changing momentarily. Even not looking at what science has come to show, but just from what we can recognize, it is continuously moving across our sky as our world turns. The sun, this large, powerful planet, not planets, what is sun, is star, thank you, has incredible power, yet it is changing momentarily. So just like every day the sun appears, but then it disappears at the end. This is the analogy of our opportunity. When the sun sets, when our day ends, the opportunity that day presented us to train our mind in the Dharma, that now is finished. That is gone and will never return. So here we need to, every night, look back on our day with some detail. And where we saw that we applied the Dharma, to the extent we saw our mind was conjoined with the Dharma, recognize and rejoice, and recommit to growing and strengthening the Dharma within us. Recognizing this incredible opportunity we have, and every time, such as right now, when we make the most of this opportunity, recognize that and rejoice, and use that as an opportunity to generate joyous perseverance. To, with joy, let go of the mundane things that dominate us so, and rather strive in what is truly meaningful. In this way, by keeping a close eye on our situation, we can see that we use it ever better. And by relying on conscientiousness, we will be mindful and diligent about how we use our time, and ensure we keep our mind on virtue. And when afflictions arise, let them go. Recognize that whatever it is that led to the arisal of the affliction, whatever the object of thought was, doesn't exist in the way that it appears. There's no valid reason for an affliction to arise. Let it go. And rather turn one's mind to virtue, such as cultivating love, compassion, and so forth.
Isang da chik tangbo dile neme nima dida bo se chik tangbo ni le che de neme nima dida bo se che chewa me kya ni se de da de ne me ba da ane tunye chesang chawa ane chewa che ba ba shin me ba ki nimo de la du se de la sa che ja ya che du se de nima de la ane nyam na che ore se de che da ni ba de le che ne ki ji luwa de lu ne ta ji nyen bo shin se de di ga so 대신 님의 수배 대디 지고만이를 파자 별 잡아이나 진짜 님의 파샤는 계시게 미두바 아니 마 광탈라 바 누치 토야며 바 차도바 나시 만쇠 루이데 깨네 손에 계지게 지고 루이다 심지 계지게 미네바 지 유어친지한 님의 타마질이야 지루고래서 어두신지 님의 세대 직당보니들 자야디 코라 님의 뒤 뒤set텔라자 니번이라 파자바이나 별 잡아이나 님의 도스 끼지게 미네 바 도스전에 공탈에 눕셔 통하며 바 차바 나신 간수 미체미 류이다 체디야 끼지끼지 지시나 남주스나 양배바 차도고 그래서지 온도 자야래도 내가 말에 대지 당보 저들라 님의 직세야지 님의 직대세야지 당보 직이래 님의 세야지 될이야 네메 니마 디다보 세제 세와 메자니스 직당보니들 니마 자랑 직제 다 세와 기지루아 메 류네 타지 님보 신스데 디니를 자도 니마 세데 야별 자바네 기지기지 지바를 잘 그 요와메 기지게 미네바 고 교어줘야 돼 자야고 자샤나 지고로 와데 그 자탕루지 월마 자야지나 강자 니가랴 자네 손야 총스 용사로 와
The further way one can use an analogy and apply it to the whole verse, taking the analogy of a sun. So the first two lines we can understand as being like during a lovely warm day when everything feels good. Today I may be without illness, have sufficient to eat and not in danger. So this is like our current situation. The sun is shining, everything is good. The second two lines are what is refers to what is actually happening, that there is momentary change, and that abundance of excellence is coming to an end, just like at night when the sun sets and we are in darkness. But this life is deceptively fleeting. This body is but briefly borrowed. So one can take this verse and apply it to the passage of time, to recognize what we have as good, to enjoy it, but to not grasp at it as lasting, but to rather see it as ideal circumstances to make the most of what we have before it expires.
And Kiwa Chimala Yapochi tour shows and Molam di Gaguru, that Mohobana, she tour shows at the Molam Gaguru. Cesata Samnalia, that said Dilton Yamna Yapochi to Mazday, Mohobana, Kiwa Chima, Militum, the Ditin, the Ligina, some Pegata, and some Liching to Yungur there.
What's been challenged in this part of this text is this deep misconception that comes from grasping a permanence. So what one often hears expressed is that, yes, I recognize what I've achieved in this life, but, and then there's a whole lot of reasons presented, and therefore, the person continues, I'm making strong prayers that for my next life, the situation will be excellent again, but I will utilize it differently. I'll make better use of it than I am now. And they're content with that. This is a deeply deceptive way to think. One has deceived oneself. But this is very common though. And then people make prayers, oh, next life may everything be perfect again. And thinking that's sufficient.
That is some data check maris there, then my sungore. Dagi Joba Dijeni, mi Luya Top Migur, Milu Topper Majurna, Dibabashi Gawames.
This way of thinking is then challenged by Shantideva in the 17th verse. With behavior such as this, a human life will not even be obtained again. If a human life is not regained, there will be negativity alone, virtue none.
Dagi Joba Dijeni, mi Luya Tominursi, Chesan Anzu that Delia, and Jig Lu Devo, and the Tunyan Chasan San Dege, and the Jig Church of Yudi Kablia, and the Jig Majibache, Sem Bame want to dance, Yomo want to songe, and Jig Dagi, Sosugi Joba, Sem D, and the Bame Dang, Bayu Mathematic, Bame, and Yomo Choson, Desha Shedan Losobata, Deniki, Yomo Chos Gedu, and the Luki Joba the Carligasne, Lunagi Jobadi, Shenlia, Nubata, Tsawata, Dibi Jobati Gillies, Chisa, Gulong, and Sem D, Bame, Bameche, Bame Dang, and Yomo Woke, Di Wangi, and Lunagi Jobati, Shenlia Tsawata, Nubi Dibi at Lingore was. Chesa Deniki Dibaje, the Lunga use Mukone, Dibaje, Deniki Didenis, Di Tang, Di Deniki, you. Jeso details you diso jesoletena haji gresne milu togumar was mi luya tobe gewachima milu togumares onde ko to togumares cuz digi maso bajan haji gresne ngason ki ru hasil jeso 당한수 되지 갈상서 오다 다데디 세딜다 냠는 제도만 마오바네 gewachima milu ton 디딘레 징세디 삼다하디 gewachima milu 간스 토고레 토토구말 와 milu 토에 유디 사고 말해서 왔다 제상하주 밀리토의 유마사가 장한손을 기에 규세고레스 제사 다기 쥐어봐 디테니 시되다 아주게 셈 바예메데 바메 땅 녀모 왕도 땅 니유 륜아기 쥐어봐 셴레 녀바다 디베 자바디기 레어도 유델레데네 밀리토고 말레스 유델레데나 한손을 기르고레스 밀리야 토미유로서다 디송을
So whilst we are in good health, our material circumstances are comfortable, and we are not in any danger, not being conscientious, our mind is led, pulled by the afflictions, and we engage regularly in non-virtue. Our mind is often afflicted, and then the speech that follows is regularly afflicted, and our physical behavior too is regularly afflicted. From this state of affairs then, how can we expect that we will attain further excellent rebirths? Even if we occasionally make some half-hearted prayers, how can we expect that this alone is sufficient to lead to a further excellent rebirth? The causes that are required to bring about circumstances such as we have are extensive and deep. So therefore, we need to challenge this delusion of believing I can delay, next life it will be better, and rather rely on conscientiousness to keep our mind restrained from coming under the influence of the afflictions, and thereby restraining our speech and our physical behavior from being non-virtuous. Because it's through being unconscientious that the afflictions pull us towards non-virtue and lead us to actually creating predominantly causes that will lead to rebirth in the lower realms. But by relying rather on conscientiousness, we can avert this situation and achieve causes for good rebirths.
Gewa San Mato, Surim Song Jimbata, Subi Yamlen, Denishin Mato Milu, number Tavati Toya de Kalekabuenza, Jizan Dineza, Lungagi Juba Bameta, the Diva Cheba and the Lungagi Jubi, same de Bameta, Yomo, Lungagi Juba, Diva Cheba and the Digimilu and Sogore, Chimilu Madon, Kewachima, and Milu and Milu Tobje Del and Yamlen Chicken said that Yamja Cooperate to us about that.
If one is not conscientious, and again, the meaning here, or the usage of conscientious, is that it keeps our mind is conscientious about staying on virtue and not being following the afflictions. So without conscientiousness, how can we be ethical? How can we be ethically restrained? We cannot be, and therefore we are not creating the primary cause that leads to a rebirth in the happier realms. Moreover, the supplementary causes for a precious human rebirth, without conscientiousness, are difficult to achieve. Causes of generosity, patience, and so forth. So without being conscientious, how can we expect somehow to achieve a further good rebirth?
Disit Kohab Yeva Delia, Antiglunga is Nijet in Butsurin Soya, that Jimbataya, Sobe, Yamnaja, Zundumet, the Nigi Kisho, the Nigi Druina, and the Yawachima, Milu Topche, and Dendelaya, Yawachima, Kohab Church, Kohab, the Ragurwada, then the Majabaje, and the Tibetan Sim Bayo, Sim Bayo, Denche, Yamnadus Chevena, Yawachima, Milu Tom, Dendelaya, Yamnaja, Kohab Ragres. Sem Bayu, Matin Baja Bame, on the Tanch, Sem Bame, Yomo on the Sunday, and Sem the Yomo on the Tan, Lunga Juba, Divajana, Dibajana, Kiwacham, Milu top couple, took Maruas, Timatova, Kiwachima meet and Yamnichi said, Kohab Meduas, or that on anybody this Mudua.
Whereas if we do rely on conscientiousness, then we will be ethical. We necessarily will be ethical. And being ethical, we are creating the primary cause that will lead to further excellent rebirths. Moreover, with a mind restrained from the afflictions, it will be much easier to engage in the complementary virtuous practices of generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance. So therefore, by being conscientious, we will accumulate abundant causes for further excellent rebirths.
And then Milu Topper Majurna, Diva Bashi Kawa Mess. Jazanda Kawachima, Denigi, Juba, Denigi Bame Tanji, Dibu Kosumge, Java Dipokan, Milu Tukumare, Milu Madonna Kawaki Resin, Milu Topper Majurbaina, Milu Matobaina, Kawachin Lingo, the Kawa Hollings, Nansona Kawalendo, yes. And then Nansona Kawaina and the Karjoras, Diva Bashi, yes, Diva Jaya, 다 나서는 개와린 바이나 다 디바 제야 되네 곧 용구래 디바 용구래서 마도 개와 제약이 고갑 안에 라요 말했어 제가 루팅에 차네 나 가서 개바이나 그냥 가서 개바나 가서 누가 용어 되고래 안데 안지 최시행해요 말现在냐 고갑이요 말 제가 되네서 가서 때라 개와 제 냠네 제 공부를 했어요 말했어 이제 디베 자와 제야 되는 거 그디는 디바데 제도 그래서 디베 자와 지기랬어 제가다 일단 가서에 때라 디바장 제베나 디 디보데 야장 가서 기마도 덴돌레 기도 말와스 제자다 데네기 덴돌레 기제 냠네 다데 고갑 유디 갑라 냠네 야고 마제바이나 마옹 바나데 덴델레 야고 지 개와 치말레 덴 야고 토제 냠네 야고 지긴 세야데 갈레 하고 시고레서 월다 제자 다데 제지 밀리마토 바나 가서에 기도 거래 가서에 기네 디바데네 바도메 바사도 거래 개와니 제 공부시고래 제자 디바 제바나 디베티보데 양장 가서에 기야마도 덴돌레 기도야 가고래 대자 최제야 고갑라야 갈레 하고래서 월
If one is not conscientious, one is not creating the causes for further accident rebirths, but one is still creating karma. Not being conscientious, one is likely to be non-virtuous, following the afflicted mind, following the mind of attachment and desire, following the minds of anger and so forth, and creating the causes that can only lead to rebirths in the lower realms. So the verse concludes with these three lines. Or maybe I read the whole verse. With behavior such as this, a human life will not even be obtained. If a human life is not regained, there will be negativity alone, virtue none. So 2 points are being made here. Firstly, if one is not relying on conscientiousness, one will not be creating the causes for a further excellent rebirth, that of ethics, and it will be difficult to accumulate the companion causes of generosity and so forth. Moreover, by the mind being lacking conscientiousness, it will be dominated by the afflictions. And thereby one will be accumulating non-virtue, and when that ripens, one falls to the lower realms. Then the second point being made is when one is in the lower realms, with that intensity of suffering and pain and self-cherishing, one will largely only accumulate further non-virtue. There will be negativity alone, virtue none. When the intensity of the pain and suffering is being experienced, the self-cherishing dominates. One will not accumulate virtue then. So how can one hope to be reborn from the lower realms and attain what we have right now?
강세 계시에 걸린 양 개와다기 맞제나 나서 동안 군몽바 대세다기 지절유스.
This brings us to the 18th verse. When I have the good fortune needed to be virtuous, but do not act virtuously, when thoroughly deluded by suffering in the lower realms, what then will I do?
나디 대시셰바다 슈바데 지바로 셰고레 강세 Geshe Thubten Rabten 다 강계세 뒤 데네갑라야 소수기 개와 제기 고갑 냠내 유비 냠내시 고갑 유비 갑텔하시오 가세게 계제 깔래야 개와 제기 냠내 고갑 가디엔스도 고갑 유디바이 가와데 템바레스 지상은 주기시 슈바나시 루이티오 유바 안에셈 강하며 받아 루이티오 유바다 안디야 지기행엔 바시 현이 미중와디 메바디 안능한 주의야 지기 류가 소수 류딩의 차내나야 최제하고 차상 튕긴 차되와 안 치용 기기 차내나 최랑래야 최 마띵겐 lama kiwi xin yu ba ane che yu de ba che sungan gi lama kiwi xin yu ba de ne ge so su gen ne nyam ne ji ko yu de ba de ka din le se ka wa de ba ke bene ka wa sang bu le sa chi wo ka wa de ba su che nyam ne ji ko gap da yu de gen ji cha ko le jo le ka se ke che ka le ya su.
This verse then summarizes the meaning of what's been presented above. So looking at this first line, reference is made to good fortune. And that is a reference to what we have right now. Our current situation is one of great good fortune. We have excellent health. We have an abundance of resources. We are in no danger. Moreover, we have met a spiritual teacher. We have met the Mahayana Dharma. And these aren't things we've just encountered, but we've encountered them and we have interest in them and intelligence to make the most of this opportunity. All of this we have. What greater good fortune can there possibly be than what we've achieved?
제가 가이든 양서 가이든에서 드니 가와 덴비 드니 고급 유리급 될이야 안 고급디 지게 담지 배직 야보시에 바셈 밤에 땅도 왕도 마다지 바유이된 냠네 수신도 제고래서 왔다 제고래서 드니기 고급 유리급 라스 제고래서 된다디 숨거래.
We have the capacity and all the conditions required to actually recognize the great good fortune we've achieved and to recognize it and actually put it to good use, to make the very most of this life. All of that is entirely possible for us.
제가 양세디 드니기 고급 유여받들 유여르데 냠네 마제바 이나시 오르다 마제 양세 마제바 이나네 양스 드니 고급 유여나 양 아니 소소기 개와다게 마제나 소소라나기 데니게 냠네 야고 마제바 이나스도라 마제바 이나 아니 안 가치기라네 제사 마제바 제셈 밤에가 원도 땅 녀모고 원도 다 륜아 주바디 안 디비 자와 제바 이나 데네 마제바 이나 개와 마제 데니기 디비 자와 제바 이나 아니 가치거선 나소를 기리에서 나소 동안 군모 봐서 나소를 마기로 그래지래.
See, then from the first line, how it links with the second. So we have this remarkable situation, but, and if this but is applying to us, this means we are not being conscientious. We are not relying on conscientiousness. Rather, we believe that things exist in the way that they appear, and therefore our afflictions arise and pull us in the direction of non-virtue and suffering in lives to come. This is our current situation, but we do not act virtuously.
예산다 안에 가서 개바이나 가서 마기로 가서 개바는 동안 군모 봐서 제상 가서 개바이네 된 가서 그 동안 봐도 매매 용어치 변는 냐와 바다 이다 뒤다 내가 군도 그디나 동안 자야 용도 거치 봐도 매봐 차가 눈도를 비신데 동안 봐도 매봐 용거치 동안 봐도 매봐 용고 그래서 동안 다 군모 봐서다 제상 동안이 주데 동안 용 디가서다 직 동안 용고 때나 직 될이야 디번에 사야고레스 디번에 사용고레스 다이나 군몽바스도 제자다 개와사야고 고급 요말레스 그래서 군몽바레스는 디제나 개와레 디제나 야고레 디제나 디바레 디야고요 말씀베기 남주기 디랭이기 게디게 남의 집에 랭이기 남의 집에 셔럽 요말레스 그 군몽바레스 하고고 말레스 제자다 가르체베나 디 지그 샘제 직 소슈 제베나 디고 용거를 개와치만 가서 기를 샘베 삼고고 말고 하고 두고 말해서 안지기 개화 제반에 디 약고를 개와치만 문디고 고 토야다 탈바 탐지kim고 고 토비 그래서 비 되니기 삼땅 두고 말지나 게디 게 랑도르기 랭이 남의 책이 셔럽 매반사 매바래 그래서 너군도 몽바래 고 몽바 몽바 먹어 버려 다 먹고 그래서 지사 하 먹어서 개वे냠을 제기 고갑 되요 말해서 제사 되니 자 동안 용거야 개वे냠을 제가 고갑매야 안데네서 맨나니까 디번을 사기로 왔어. 제가 디시슈하나지 야야 가와지에서 나솔게 뭐도 덴들이야 난 기투야 깔하고 와서 그래.
The verse continues with the result of what comes from not being conscientious. When thoroughly deluded by suffering in the lower realms. So this term, thoroughly deluded, could be thoroughly confused. It refers to the word for ignorance that is best translated as ignorance of confusion, of not knowing. And this is the situation for beings in the lower realms. They are thoroughly deluded. This lack of knowing, this deep ignorance of their situation is pervasive for them. it completely blinds them. Because of the intensity of their suffering and pain, as well as the intensity of their ignorance, their lack of intelligence, how can they accumulate virtue? You can spend as much time as you want trying to explain to an animal the faults of killing, but they are too thoroughly deluded to understand and change their behavior. They are helpless. Their situation is hopeless. All they can do is follow their delusions. But being so thoroughly deluded, they only accumulate, there is one, negativity alone and virtue none.
And just you are let you Sungorva. Jesa Dondala, the 6 years Sungagi, Donda, Ningbo to Dubena, Tangzu, Gomja said, Jig Jokom, not Jegom said Chagorova, that is to the Jegom to Chagore, Jesa Jegom, Dineca Chagores, and Jesa Dushin, Dushin, some tango race or that. Jesa that Cedelia, sem that is so Ludi, and the Gadistus. Lutedan Yobata, and Sosugi, Nena Zemeba, Tunyan Chazan, Sandiot, Yaburesha, and Begi, Di Yobadi, Hakovache, De Yoba. That Denegi, that Deliang age, Sim Bame Matembaina, Bayu Matembaina, Sim Bame on Tabaina, and Garriosenem, Delia, Duecha, Contro, Nayaki, Di Ongi, and Delia, Duecha, Contro, Nayaki, Lunagi, Jobatia, Shenlian, the Tipilia at the Java Tung to us. That Divas which in Javaina, just a Lu Yugone, Divas, Angayugone, Divasa, Yugone, Divasavina, Debate would any Gavachima, Hawakirison, Nason Kigurma to Tendril Kit Marvas, Nason Kigres, some Dushin, some da. And Nason again a carrier lamna, Nason again, Nasun Tunga bottom of a young Chagres. Jezada, Nasun it until any Divanis or Esta, the court seemed so church, the Shalan Bajan, Divan the bottom of Sagors. 이제 개월 주야기 고급되다 요 말이에요. 가서 강아 누가 용거에 직지에 안지 나서게나 개월 주야기 주당고라 신고 말이에요. 가서 남주기 개화단 디베기 디제네 개월에 디제네 디고 용거 선배기 랭이게 남미 집에 남주호랑 요 말. 매 봐서 몽발이 몽대 한목화시 되고. 그래서 한목화는 제가 대세 대다기 지지지자요. 근데 한목화는 개월 주야 가르쳐야 할 가고 제도야 믿어 와서 두시네 삼당. 다 되네게 삼당이 되다. That in also doing a deeper seven, then also like Yasu, then dental tire cohort was. Tire cohort manner, then Kawasha coughed out in the dragon was. Kawasha cohort manner, Sunusiada, Jamnije, Comseada, and Dameva, Tomai Topo Comse, Dameva Comse. That Guinea, the Tarbada, Tamji Kimbo Govan, pass Guinea Toya Meva Maze, Mundio Govan. Melhada mi govanya totu mindua something. Dine sometimes do in a sometime that did not reach at just dinesa, diring dadanga, den, Luden de la, and the jig, de Wuyoba, and the jig, Tunyan Chasan Sadioba, Rangi Munega, Tunyan Sawa, Chi Munega, Evasion Yoba, Chuje, Chusunga Yoba, and the Sosunga Chetu Yoko, oh, that thing is do Dilia Yakumajin, the best Sasari, some jen, the nigger some daje, the name do the Langazuki, Chitundri Somche, and the Yamnache or Estum Soyata, and the Supercomiala, so but in Jamnichomia, and Geshe Thubten Rabten and Yamnache or Es. Dijeba ina, the Kawakan Lunagi. Jamnijigom, Janjusem Commodu, Sem de Gavi, Bahiting or Sem Gavi shows Tangore, Sem Gavi shows Tang, Lunga Jubada, and Gavicha to Yores. Jezada Sim Gitone, Gawa Lunga when they go to Modu, and Gawachima in a Dendroli Gurus, the Dendroli Kinem, and Dendelina, Yamlecha Cobra, didn't do China to Yaria to Gores, do China some Tangores, Jezada and Yamlenchi, Sam Mason, the Samlo, Dumba, the Dunia. Donyer Dumba de Suksher Daya, Dushin, Kiji Chiba, Mitaba, some Daya, and then Anson Makeva, Divasagi over some Daya, Anson Kevena, Chichi Yakop Meva, and the Duse Momba Imba, Gao, Tapshikam into us, and sometimes Dushin, sometimes that did that you go up telepe, Yakshu Tirisha, that didn't imagine a Gidicha, that didn't Chiakudu and Pigada, Donyer Dumba, and Dushin, Zuni Gage, and Senpai, Yam the Chokores. donda disung korda.
Meaning of what Shantideva is presenting is that he's guiding us in how to, in what to meditate on with analysis, so analytical meditation rather than placement meditation. So we need to recognize just how truly remarkable our current situation is. That we are amongst the very few in this world who have relatively good health, as well as a material comfort, and are not in any danger. This is really something quite remarkable, not something to be considered ordinary and to take for granted. And if in the situation of this ideal foundation, we are not conscientious, we will continue to be led by our afflictions, anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, and competitiveness. And through this, we accumulate so much non-virtue through our physical behavior and through our speech. And the result of this is only suffering. And when it leads to rebirth, the result can only be in the lower realms. And when there, the intensity of the pain and the suffering is such that our self-cherishing dominates. We cannot think of others. Likewise, because of the strength of our deluded ignorance, we cannot be guided. We cannot be guided in what are the causes of suffering and the causes of happiness. It is too late. Then, as the 18th verse concludes with, what will we do then? What can be done for us? What can we do? We will be completely helpless. Recognizing this, use this recognition then to let go of what's unimportant. All these things that dominate one's mind, trying to achieve pleasurable circumstances, overcome minor problems, let them go. They have no value. Rather, take what does have value, cultivate it within. Strive to cultivate what has real meaning. Come to recognize nothing exists in the way that it appears. Everything that I'm drawn towards doesn't exist in that way. Everything that I'm repulsed from, it too doesn't exist in that way. In this way, meditate on selflessness. Recognize our great good fortune and commit to utilizing it in the best way, principally by relying on conscientiousness, cultivate ethics, generosity, and other great qualities such as love, compassion, and patience. All of these come about in dependence on conscientiousness, where we recognize that the afflictions should never be tolerated or accepted, but we should rather ensure at all times, in all circumstances, our mind is under the influence of virtue. And furthermore, as we come to recognize the great value of what we have achieved, this remarkable rebirth, and all these circumstances that we have, but see that it is impermanent, it is changing, it is not going to last, and its loss will be a great loss for us. This gives us a courage to be consistent in our striving, not to be occasional practitioners, but at all times, whatever we're doing, that our mind is on the Dharma, and we are thereby engaging in virtue, letting go of what is unimportant, striving in what has value.
Diva Sabai, di Table Nason Kiyopa, Nason Kibana, Naso Dunga Yonga, and Nasun Italia, and Kevache, Kohab Medigan. The Nizan Nason Kibana, the Niki, Kohab Medigan, the Niki Samta. And the Niki, that you in the toilet, Daddy didn't Ludin de la Sosuke, and to Nechasan Sanjoba, near Natse Meba, and to say bene sayadong yo no tunye cawa shenye cewa jeba med ganga meduge ane ranji gewe shenye yede ba chue sungya ge ni sungya yede ba dine gogo yo ba de dam yago dichi tong jiza di tong du dingi de da dirin gogo de be yago re ja da dirin di 제마도 때 사서를 선배가 삼게 코로도 되네 디링 뒤수에 고갑대 약고시고 통화되다 뒤수에 될이야 하는 게 냠내 지긴 세비 도치는 또 전에 섬체 냠내 지고 그래 해서지다 도승도와 지자 디가서 가르승고라세나 데니게 삼두스탄 냠내 지고 그랬다 럼름 가서 봐야나 아주 덴주류디에서야다 아니 체와 미다바서야다 제 어디서 지가 차기도 와 지자 체와 미다바 지자다 데니게 가서 개부 중요해 남기린 바셔도 제가 개딕 디피게 내가 서 개도 그래서 다 도신 써야 돼. 다 지바 차고 도와돼서.
When you hear about practicing virtue, what this means is just this. Your mind is virtuous. Your mind is dominated by a virtuous quality rather than an affliction. So when one is engaging in one's daily activities, but one's mind has generated love, an understanding of love or of compassion or of patience or of ethics or an understanding of impermanence, whatever virtuous quality such as that one is engaging with one's daily activities, one is practicing virtue. To be able to do that in one's daily life requires a deep habituation to that way of thinking, to the virtuous way of thinking, so that it becomes a part of who you are. And being a part of who you are, that is how you will be thinking as you go about your daily activities. This is how you bring all your activities onto the path. This is how you bring the Dharma into your daily life. So to do so, you need to take time aside from one's daily activities to reflect on the Dharma, to read, to listen, to reflect, and strengthen one's habituation to virtue. Then, when engaging in activities, to try and be mindful, using conscientiousness to ensure your mind is not afflicted whilst one is engaging in mundane activities. Then one is practicing Dharma throughout one's daily life. So in the meditation, reflect that the body we have, so this life, this healthy situation, and all our circumstances are impermanent. They are changing momentarily. And the slightest of causes can lead them to changing radically. And when we don't recognize further that when we take things for granted, and we are acting without the understanding of the Dharma, we will not be conscientious, and our afflictions will dominate. Desire will arise and will be followed. Anger will arise and it will be followed. In this way, the causes for suffering are accumulated. And those causes don't only lead to suffering in this and future lives, but can even lead to rebirth in the lower realms. And once there, we need to recognize that our situation will be hopeless. Well, we will be without hope and we will be helpless. Our suffering will be intense, our stupidity will be intense, and therefore we are without hope. But we need to recognize that we have this incredible opportunity of health, comfort, and all the other external conditions of having met a teacher and the teachings, and we have an interest in them. Rejoice in this, embrace your opportunity, recognizing what has value and what doesn't. Strive in what has value, in formal sessions as well as in your daily life. So from the Lamarum teachings, what is being presented here by Shantideva are the topics of precious human rebirth, the impermanence of this life, and the lower realms. So combine your knowledge from those Lamarum topics in your meditations here.
Andu chene samla dandu chene shimju che cheba che de ko mui ko chene ge tsedele chue nyamlen je ko be gyumje ma je ba ina 아니 지금 가르가르 요바요바도 두신 예수의 하고 요도 시윤 되니게 삼지 하고도 대체제에게 등이 좀 받아 냠내 제고 지 야고 용거래와 용거래 제자 되니게 하고 가야 돼 제바제 두 삼다 신고야 돼 계치 못 차고 해지로와 제자 되니로와다 인하지로와 당아도 내 마신 거야나 되니게 김제 몽보 삼다 마신 거야나 체주가 배 고바디 김제인데 야고 마도 했네 되니 제력 등이 좀 숙지 못 계도 말봐 지단은 저게 최기지만 레게네 직가리네 야구 중하들이야 이 금세다 망부 제약에 탑시디 샤사 하고는 레게디 제원에 된다 두야디 두투야다 지제다 마싱부 탑시 하모거나 레게 된다 두투고 말봐 디나시 현례 네버를 기고 직기베네 즉 현례 강아 되베나 베지 시 야구 유캔 삼로 야구 따되겐 콜야 간스니어베기네 코강아제 투세로 콜 가르치네 야사서 삼망보 땅에 심주 야고 시트면 되게 내가 야고 기도라 강아제도라 되네가 삼는 시라마당 되게 시라 강아제 두고 말와 베네 zemne하게 직강아 먹고 되는데 미시윤전 연전 전부도 얘기 지금마다 연전 메칸 안으로 하지는 가 미치길이야 강아제마다 가고 시도해요 말봐 미치길이야 자그래져 두고라 저 스몰더라신의 유튜브로 마도 지제말 미시윤전 되게 아니 롭종 야고 얘기한게 남주의 배제다지 소소 파강아 바 쿠심심 나로 주되잖아. 되네 바 쿠소수기 롭종 시엔디 배제다지 디 시엔디 배제 lokwa시 다시 현랴 강아테야 뇌세게 배 강아테도 숙지면 제도도 하디 미 롭종 얘기한다 시엔 얘기한 삼로 땅한 게 그 내내시는 콜은 여기 디제고도 탑시 차상도 하고 도요도 안 디기 견제 그 제도거와 니 강아테베나 되네 제도도 다지 야고 제도네 되네기 니서 야고 하고 시엔제 아니 시엔제 되게 야고 주도 얼마도 시엔메나 판도야 야고 제도야 말아 시엔메는 아주 시엔메 밀라 네베기네 숙침부 제도야 말 판도 주나 판도 숙침부 주도야 가야 말다 아주 나도를 쇼지나 제가 당연히 디나신 아주 최념을 제발에 그 되네지나 되네숑가 되네지네 되네 야고 신바이나 신 지금 냠는 제다다 내가다 세상 야고지 하고 왜네 냠는 제에 덤바 등이 춤바게다 냠는 제 야가지고 두야자 지금 마신 왜네 지금 접수체마도 신 지금 가르치고 시도 제도 말와 제다신 말 마신네 야게 줘도야 말아 제자 되네자다 니가 저기 시월에 챔피게 두천 두수 삼당을 두수 삼다 두수 삼당 고래 두천 되네 용거래서 삼당나 니가 저리야 시엔 두수네 두수 난거로 와다 저 럽셔로지
From presentations such as these, we come to see more clearly, or at the very least be reminded of, the faults of not engaging in the Dharma, not cultivating it within, but continuing to follow our afflictions. So this knowledge needs to be gained and it needs to be reflected on repeatedly. This is how things are integrated. Otherwise, one just stays ignorant and one walks through this world blindly. And this is the case for so many. They may have a human rebirth, but from our perspective of the Dharma, they are thoroughly deluded. They don't have to be. They have capacity for so much more, but they haven't created all the causes to utilize that capacity. But we have. In all circumstances in life, knowledge is of great benefit. But mere knowledge is of very little use. Knowledge that is then put into application leads to excellent results. So all your various skills that you have, these have come about in dependence on gathering of knowledge and training yourself, and you can utilize those skills in your life. That is the process here. Gathering knowledge and incorporating it within. Incorporating it within means that it is how we start to think. We experience the world through the Dharma. And another analogy you can use is that if we divide the world into ordinary beings such as ourselves and those beings who have power and influence, those who have power and influence are the ones who can potentially and do bring great harm. For ordinary people such as ourselves in society, we can bring harm for sure, but only on a very limited basis. But those who have power and influence, they can bring great destruction. And that power and influence has come about usually independent on a lot of knowledge. So the scientists who make these weapons that cause so much destruction, they have incredible knowledge. And those who work out the ways to launch those weapons and the plans in which they'll be most effective, also incredible knowledge and experience based on that knowledge. These are not people you generally describe as lacking knowledge, being ignorant in that sense, or of lacking skill. They are knowledgeable and have skill in their field and can bring such destruction. If that is the case on the negative side, so too on the positive side. So if we aspire to be the very greatest that we potentially can be, we need to develop an abundance of knowledge, a great wealth of knowledge, but not merely an intellectual learning. We need to continuously apply it, cultivate it within, so that this becomes our very way of thinking. And in this way, we are creating the causes so that when, in general, the causes are there, we can bring great benefit into the world. We can ease the suffering of many beings, guide them, lead them in how to cultivate the causes for lasting happiness. So in the same way that we see this in the world, we should challenge our habits. But to do so, to change our habituations, to develop new habituations, this can only come about in dependence on the gathering of knowledge and the integration of that. So that's the very purpose why Shantideva gave these teachings, why these teachings are being shared, and why you are here each week to receive them. The very purpose of these teachings is to gather knowledge and then do these meditations, both in a formal situation, but to keep them in mind, but keep reminding ourselves of them throughout our daily activities. In this way, the Dharma isn't something that we go somewhere to do, or we sit in a certain posture to do. Our very mind is the Dharma.
All right, that is Yasana.
Then thank you. We'll finish there tonight. Thank you so much.